Hi guys, welcome back to the introduction to the VBA, and this is going to be the part number 2. So in this video now, as I was telling you in the last video, that we are going to actually talk about the some of the questions on the the commands which we learned in the video number 1, right? The part 1, actually I should say how to work with the ranges. So let's go and talk about these 6 questions I have prepared for you, right? Because this will give us the enough confidence. So let us start, guys. So the first question is, create a button. If we click on it, it will select the entire table. Remember, if I modify the data and click again on button, complete table should be selected. So what we are saying here is that we have to first of all create a button here. So let's quickly go to the insert and let's click on the shape, and let me first of all create a button. So I just go and draw this button. Okay, so let's say this is your button, and you can write here something if you want. Let's say you can say that run the macro, or maybe select the range here, right? So we can say select the range. Okay, so that way I create the button here, and now what I will do is I will simply go and create a macro, and that macro we will link with this button. So that's something we will do little later. Now understand the question. So the question is that you have to select this table like this, So if I click here, what should happen? This table should be selected like this. Okay, and there is a condition also. If I modify this table, for example, if I delete this table by these many the number of rows, then what should happen? If I click on that, my table now should be this is what I want in the selection, right? And similarly, if I expand the table, if I enter something here, then what should happen? When I click here, my table should select the entire content. So this is what we need to do. So how will you do it? So now there are 2 ways which I'm going to tell you. Okay, the first method which you should know is that you can record the macro. Okay, so in the macro, if you go and record it, let's see how we're going to do it. So first of all, let's go to the developer tab and let's hit on the record macro. So I'm going to hit on the record macro. This is my macro 1. For the time being, let's keep it as macro 1. Let's not change the name of the macro, though I always say that it's always a good idea to give the the proper naming convention, but for the time being, let's give it the macro 1. Now guys, very important. Now so most of you must be what they are going to do. They are going to select that, and then they are going to use the shift key, and they are going to click here. This is the method you would approach, right? If you do that way and you stop the recording, see what is going to happen. If I take you to the Visual Basic Code, and if I click on the module, see, this is your actually macro which is recorded. Let's remove these comments. Okay, so this is your macro. Now this macro is very simple. You can see that it simply says that select the K5 colon K12 the range, right? So this range is going to be selected. So the moment I run this code, so I'm going to press F8. There we go. Now you see that this is going to be selected, right? So this is how we can select the multiple ranges. Okay, now the important point which you need to note here is that first of all, this is not a single cell. So that's why in the previous video you learned that how to select the cell. So if I say you go to the K5, this is how you write, right? But if I say that you have to select the multiple cells, then you obviously can't use this command. Okay, so in that case, what you do, you provide the colon sign, and then you give the starting point of your table and the end point of your table. Rest everything remains the same, right? So this is how, when this is going to work, this is how it looks like. So I quickly go here and I say that link this macro with this my assigned macro. And by the way, we can do one thing. Instead of giving this macro 1, I can simply just go and write here the question number 1. Okay, so that when you do the practice, you can refer to this. Now guys, I go here, I right click, I say assign macro. So you're going to select the question number 1, you click here, and now we are done. So the moment I click here, you see the macro is working. Perfect. If I click outside, I click here, the macro is working. But now this is fine, but there is a problem in this code, and this is what I want to today tell you, and this is what you will be using in the VBA throughout this course, because this is very important. Because we work in the tables every time. We work with the data, and if you want to automate the data, you should know all these tricks, right? These are the very important points that how to select the table. Now guys, the problem is, if you look at my question, the question says that it should always select the table if even I go ahead and modify the table. Now the question is, if you just go and write here some number, for example like this. Now if you click here, do you see that the table is not selected? Why? Because if you look at this, this clearly says that you have to end your table at K12. However, now you have modified the table and it should now go to the K15, because this is the K15, this is the K15. So maybe if I just go and write here 15, I'm okay with that. Right now if I run this F8, or maybe I just hit on this, the table will be selected. But then as a programmer, as somebody who is running the macro, I cannot always go in the background and edit the code. So you need something which is going to be dynamic. So how will you do that? So this line which you have written, this is not the correct way to select the table, guys, because this is a very static code, right? This is a static code, or you can say a static range, because this is not going to increase automatically, right? If tomorrow I go and write here, let's say test, then this is not going to select the test, that if I click here. So what we need to do is, you don't have to write the endpoint like this, right? There are several ways of doing it, but right now what I'm telling you is that's the easiest way. Now let us go ahead and record the macro again. I can directly also write this syntax, but I want you to be comfortable, because initially these commands looks little difficult, but trust me guys, maybe with a little bit of practice, you will be feeling quite comfortable in using these commands. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna record the another macro, and this time this macro 2, let me give this macro 2 name. Now see this. Now I go here and I select this K5. Once I select the K5, I will not make the use of mouse, like I press shift key and I click here, because that way the table is going to be selected, but then the VBA will generate the syntax K5 to K16, right? K16 or K17, whatever it is. But then that is something we do not want, because we don't really need the cell addresses, because cell addresses are always going to make your range static. So what we are supposed to do here now, if you are an expert in Excel, then you know that to select the entire table, we can also use a shortcut key, Control Shift down arrow key. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm on my K5, and from here I'm going to press Control Shift down arrow, and this is going to take you to the last value of this table, and this is what we needed. So now I click on the stop recording. Okay, now so Control Shift down arrow key, what it is going to do, basically it is used for the data, to select the data, right? Now for example, let me quickly, before I take you to the VB code, if you are new to this the shortcut key, then this is very important for you. Look at this now. Suppose this is a small table I have prepared here. Now I come here and I want you to select the entire table. So what will you do? Maybe you can use the right arrow, and then one by one you can use the down arrow. But this is not the good way, because you may have 10,000 20,000 rows in a table and you cannot use this. Maybe you would say that, okay, so Ajay, I'm going to select this cell and then I press shift key and I click on the last key. Well, that's also fine, but what is the good way? The shortcut key is, you come to the top cell and say Control Shift right arrow. Now keep your Control Shift pressed and say down arrow. So this is how, guys, you will be able to select the entire table. You want to go the other way, for example, you want to start from here, no problem. Control Shift right arrow, Control Shift up arrow. There we go. Similarly, if you are here, Control Shift down arrow. Now Control Shift right arrow. So it's all up to you how you want to do. For example, if I'm here, I say Control Shift up arrow. Now Control Shift up arrow, and now Control Shift left arrow, right? So guys, this is very easy, right? So always remember these shortcut keys. This is what we are actually going to use. Okay, so by the way, I should also go ahead and write this for you. So So this is for you. I have written here control shift will always be there. Now you have to see whether you want to use the down arrow key or the left arrow key or the right arrow key or the up arrow key, right? That's all up to you. I mean, that depends upon the requirement. Okay, so now let's go to the Visual Basic and see that what is the code generated. So I click on the Visual Basic and look at this. Now this is entirely a different code from the macro 2. Right now you cannot compare the question number 1, this macro code with this macro. This is really looking entirely different. But guys, what is this? Range selection comma selection dot end excel down. This is exactly your control shift down arrow key. So I'll just put the comment here. So this is your control plus shift and then down arrow key. Okay, this is your code generated. So initially it takes a little time to write the code. I mean, I can directly also write, if I'm very have a practice, I can write like this, that the selection comma selection dot end and then so on excel down. If you remember this line, you can write like that as well. But when I was learning the VBA 10 years back, what I was following is that I was kind of like used to record the macros. After recording the macro, I used to see that syntax, so you don't have to worry about it. Now this is a very powerful line, right? But here we have one problem. I'll tell you what. First of all, you see that, for example, if I just go and now I change this macro link to my the macro 2, for example. Let's do that. Now you see that if I just go and click here, what's gonna happen? Look at this. The macro actually is selecting this table, which has no relevance with this exercise because we wanted to select this table. And if you just go down, you see that this is actually not going to end till our last row, which is going to be 1 million, right? So if I just keep on moving down and down and down, you see that the entire table is selected. So basically what happened when you ran this command, when you recorded this macro, if you have seen the video number 1, part 1, you know that what happens in this line, basically we are saying that from the range, from my selection, right, just give me the control shift down arrow key, right? So what happens if you just go to any blank cell and you press control shift down arrow key, it takes you to the last cell. Why? Because in these all cells there is no entry, there is no non-blank cell, right? So if I click here and I run this macro, you see this is going to select this range because control shift down arrow is working on this. So you have to make sure, you need to make sure that if you are running control shift down key, it should be first on the K5, isn't it? So guys, what we will do here is we will simply say that before we run this, I want to be on the K5, and this is how we write, right? Now when you run this command, let me put run this F8. Now look at this. First it is going to make sure that it should be in the K5. So let's say if I'm here, so if I'm on the C13, then I run this command, it takes me to the K5, and from the K5 now it's going to say that selection, what is your selection? Your selection is obviously K5. So from my selection K5, I have to go end excel down. There we go. Now this is your dynamic code. So now if you just go and delete anything, for example, if I just go and delete this and now I hit on this, you see this is always going to select the entire table, right? So even if you just go and enter some more values, for example, I just go and create like this and I hit here, look at this guy. So what is happening? Basically your macro is going on the K5, and on the K5 like this, it goes on the K5, and from the K5 it's using control shift down arrow key. So this is very important, right? So that is what you need to learn. Now I will not encourage you to use this method unless there is some specific requirement, because this is the dynamic one. If you just go and run this code, it's always going to select the K5 to K15, because here we have K15, right? But in this case you are not saying that you got to go to this cell because you are using the selection dot end excel down, right? So that is how you actually work with the dynamic ranges. So this is the question number 1 for you, and I click here and that's how it should work. So I would write here, this is basically the question number 1, and this you should use. Okay, so question number 1, and then I will say that dynamic. Okay, so you'll find all these the questions in this workbook. Okay, these answers you'll find it. Now let's go to the next question and let's see that what we have gotten. So I go here and it says now create a button, cell C10 to C20 should select. So basically we are saying that this C10 to C20 should be selected. Well, that's quite easy. I think you can simply go and create the macro. So let's go and do that. So instead of you now recording the macro, you can do that, I mean, right, there's no problem. But guys, let us now write the code by ourselves. Let's not record the macro. So how are you going to do that? So I go here and I write the name of the macro, sub. So I'm going to write here the question number 2, right? You write the question number 2, you start the bracket, open parenthesis, close parenthesis, press enter, and there we go. You see that the line is inserted, the partition line is there, and now you're on the question number 2. Okay, now, so what we're going to do is we simply say that range, and then we're going to write C10. This is how we write C10 to C20 dot select. Isn't it, guys? Simple. Now if I go and run this, so let's say my cursor is here, and let's do the testing. Let us go and press F8. So there we go, and you see that it is working. If you record the macro will also give you the same syntax, right? But there's no need to record the macro because this is something now we are capable enough of handling it. Now obviously you need to create the button here, so let's go and create the button. So I go in the insert and you can choose any of the shapes. So I use this rectangular box, right, and just right click on this button, go to the assign macro, and we're going to say that the question number 2. I click OK, and now next time when I run this, you see that this is going to work. Great. Let's go to the question number 3. Now the question number 3 is that create a button. If I click, then column D to column H should select. So basically this column D to column H, this is the macro, should be able to do it. Okay. Create one more button. If I click, cells A1 to D50 of sheet Q2 should be selected, and sheet Q2 should become active sheet. So basically we have 2 macros we want to create here. Now let's talk about the first macro, which is to select the columns. So let's go and insert the button here. Okay, so I go and insert the button. So this is my button, and I'm going to simply say that column selection, column select. Okay, so let's say this is my button name. Okay, now if you know the command, very nice, but because we have just begun, so we may not be knowing the command. So what is the solution? Let's go to the developer tab. Let's hit on the record macro. So I'm really going to give you good practice on the recording the macros, right? So let's go and write this, let's say selecting columns. This is what we can do, right? So I click OK. And now what I will do, I have to select the D to H. So I select this, I click on this D column, and then what I do is I simply go to the H column, keeping my shift key pressed. So this is done. I have selected the table, stop the recording. I think we are done. Let's go to the Visual Basic, and this is what we have for you. So this is the module, right? Control R if you remember the Project Explorer. So I'm writing everything in the module 1. So this is your selecting columns, and this is, you should remember. Okay, so, and I can write here that this is basically the question number 3, the part 1, because we have to create the 2 macros, right? So I'll just put the comment here. So you can see that again it is so easy to understand this. Now the best part about the VB is that it's not really a machine language, right? It's more of like your English language. So if you understand English, you can learn this VB so easily. Now you see that if I look at this syntax, you can also make a sense that what it is, what it is trying to do. It is simply trying to select the columns D to H, right? So we are writing here columns and then D to H, because it is going to be the entire column. So that's why you don't see any D2 to H4 or D1 to H60, because it's not about the cells, it's about selecting the entire column. So when I run this macro F8, you see that, guys, I have selected the entire column. Great. So now you quickly go and right click here and you assign the macro, and this is what the macro is, selecting columns. Now you see that because we have not kept the by default naming convention which always macro editor offers, like macro 1, macro 2, macro 3, macro 4. So it's so easy for us to recognize our macros, and this is what I was talking about in my first video, that give it a good name so that when you assign the macros, when you work, when you come back to your VBA file, you should be able to get the idea that this macro actually was made keeping these things in mind. So let's select the OK, and now I'm gonna click OK, and you see that this macro is working, right? So anytime you click here, this D2H will be selected, right? So maybe I can do one thing, I can just right click on this, and so once it gets selected I can move it somewhere here. Maybe I can do that, right? And by the way, if you want to change the color of this, so when you select this, this format option gets highlighted, so you can go to the format option and you can use the different colors here. I'm using Excel 2016. If you're using the 2007, 2010 or 13, you may have different colors, but I guess because I have worked in 2010 and 2007, it's not really much difference. But anyways, it's all about the color, guys. I mean, you can choose the different colors here, right? But this option is available when you select this. If you click outside that format tab, that format tab is gonna miss. So if I just right click here, I select that, then this format tab will come, and from there you can go and change the color. Okay, so this is the first macro. Now the second macro is that if I click on that, then A1 to D50 should be selected, but that A1 to D50 should not be in this sheet. We are not talking about this. We are talking about actually the Q2 Q2 sheet, actually this sheet. Okay, so we have to first go there. So as usual, let's go and hit on the shapes. Let's create the macro. So I just go and use this shape. I create like that, and here I just write that range selection, and I write the Q2 sheet. Let me just go and increase the height of this. So this is how it is. Okay, so that's how it is, or maybe you can just keep it like this. That's all up to you. So we can quickly select this. You select this, click here. You can also just simply select this, because right now I can right click here, or I can, maybe if I don't have to use the right click, I can simply go and select this as well, because there is no macro assigned, so it will work. But once you assign the macro, always use the right click to do the selection. So if I want to change the the kind of this color, I can go and change that. So that's how it looks like. So now I go and go and create the macro, guys. So you can again record the macro, that's all up to you, but we will not do that. So now I will do one thing. I will go here, press enter, give it some space, and now let's go and write the another macro. So here we're gonna say that select range, and then we write here the Q2 sheet. So this is the name I'm going to give it. Okay, so open bracket, close bracket, open parenthesis, close parenthesis. Now the first thing which you need to do is, that if I have to select A1 to do D50, I can simply say range, and then I can say that A1 colon to D50. That's what I can do. I close the bracket and I can select that. But the point is, if I run this right now, it is going to select the A1 to D50 of this sheet. But this is something we do not need, because we want it to go in the Q2 sheet, right? So if you remember from the previous part number 1 video, what command we write, I can record the macro and I can show you, but I hope you have done the practice so you remember it. It's sheet, and then you write the sheet name, right? So what is the sheet name? The sheet name is Q2, and then double quotes and dot select. Okay, that's how you can write. You can also go and write worksheets. That's all up to you. Both the lines are fine. Some people also write worksheets, and then you go and write, so this line is also okay. Right now I have just commented it because there's no point of using the same line again and again. So now let us go and run this line. So let's do the testing. So I click on F8. Now this should take me to the Q2 sheet. So as you can see here, I'm on the Q2 sheet. Now this should select the A1 to D50. You can see here, so we have selected the A1 to, this D50. If I just scroll it down, let me show you if it has selected the correct range or not. So I move it down and you can see that we got the A1 to D50. So this is working. Let's come back to the Q3 sheet. Let's right click here, assign macro, and now we are going to say that this is the macro. So I just go and click OK guys. Now the next time when I run this, you see that it's going to take me to the Q2 sheet and then it's going to select the A1 to D50, right? So this is done. Let's go to the next question. Now before I go to the next question, I want to tell you something. This I will cover in the the next chapter also, not the next chapter, but I mean in the chapter where we will be talking about the variables. But you must know that there are some rules which we need to follow by giving the name to our macros, right? You see that I'm using the underscore. Is it mandatory? No, it is not mandatory. So for example, I go here and I say that I want to give a name to my macro, which is 123. You start the macro like this, you press enter. The moment you press enter, the compile error will come, right? So VBA will not allow you to enter any number, right? Why any number? Because if you look at this, I have used here 2. So am I actually contradicting myself? Basically the point is you cannot use any macro having only numbers. That is the first thing. Now at the same time, even if you go and write here, let's say one test, so when you click outside, you see again you will have the error guys. So they say that you cannot start your macro with any number. That's the rule number 1. Okay, so number can come, but it's not going to be in the first place. So maybe you can write here test 1, that is allowed. So you look at this, the moment I pressed enter, automatically end sub is created and VB has accepted that, but I cannot put the number in the beginning. If I do that, it will not allow me to go, right? Similarly guys, you cannot use any special character, like you cannot use the star, right? So if I just try to use that, it's not going to allow. So special characters like dollar, if I just go and use the dollar, it's not allowed. Okay, and then so any special character, if you use even the and sign, the VBA will not allow you. The only thing which you can use is the underscore. Okay, now why I use the underscore? So if you have a long name in the macro, to make it more readable, you can use the underscore. For example, you're saying that so your macro says Outlook testing, okay, Outlook testing email. Now instead of writing all this in one line, I can just use the underscore so that it is more readable. Now I beg your pardon, I think I used the close parenthesis, I just put the underscore. Look at this now this is more readable. So that's the only purpose when I use the underscore, right? So what you have learned, the rule number 1 says, rule number 1, when you give a macro name, okay, when you give or I would say that when you give a name to your macro, then what sort of things you need to always remember. So when you give a name to your macro, the first thing which you want to always understand is that it cannot begin with number. Okay, for example, you cannot write like this 1 TST, 1 TST. This is wrong guys, okay, because 1 cannot come in the first instance. Of course after that you can use it, right? So you can say test 1 is okay, test 1, or let's say T1, or let's say T1 2 3, they are all fine, this is accepted, okay, because number is not coming in the first position. Then what is the second rule? The second rule is that you cannot use the no special characters are to be used. Okay, this I already showed you. For example, these all commands, etc., are not allowed in macro names. Okay, however, you can use the underscore, isn't it? This is the one, right? You can use that. That's perfect. Now there is another thing which you should know, that VBA, in the macro names you cannot use VBA reserved words. What do you mean by the reserved words? Now the reserved words are the words which you actually which are the programming words which VBA uses. For example, this sub is what? This is a VBA word. This end sub is what? This is again a VBA word. And in the coming times you will learn more about the another words as well, right? So for example, if I say that I give the sub name, again I give the sub name, this is not allowed. Why? Because this sub actually is my macro name. This is a VBA reserved word, not a macro name, but macro name is not possible, right? So if you just go and put the underscore, then obviously that's a different thing. Then this will be allowed. If you just go and press enter, you see that it is allowed, because now this is not sub, this is sub underscore. Similarly, there is another word in VBA which is called dim. If I try to do that, you see I will get the error. Now you would ask me why? Because guys, dim is a VBA word. This is what you're going to learn in the variable chapters, right? So any word which is a programming word, you cannot use that, right? So keep this thing in mind, right? So anyways, if for a moment, even if I believe that you just forgot it, you forgot these rules, though you will get the hang of it, because as the time passes and you do more practice, these things will come naturally to you. You don't really have to remember, you don't really have to put stress or or in remembering these things. This is something which your experience will let make you perfect, right? You don't really have to worry about all these things. But what I'm saying is that even let's say for a moment, if you find that you forgot it, then what is the solution? Well, that's very easy, because VBA will throw the error. VBA will not allow you to go forward, so you'll get the error. There's no big deal, right? So if I just say that a sub and I write something wrong like this, 22 ABC, and I start my macro, I press enter, VBA will not allow you to go there, So definitely guys, you really don't have to worry so much about it, right? So these are the rules, and so it's a good that we have covered this today, today. And now let's go to the question number 4. So in the question number 4, now we have another task, which is create a button. If I click, it should select the entire table. Please note that if the table shrinks or expand, macro should readjust accordingly. So now guys, this is the same command, right? We have to use the control shift right arrow and down arrow. You already know that, right? So you can simply go to the record macro and you can say that selecting underscore table. So I'm using the underscore. Look at this, right? Would you like to put any description? Well, yes, we can put the description that this is question number 4, right? So that sort of thing, you can do that. Or maybe you can put the question number 4 here. That's all up to you. Okay, so I just go and say that. Okay, now what do you need to do? You go to this cell G2, and now don't use the previous approach, which is that just select the shift key and press this, click here in the I11, because then syntax will be generated, which is range G2 to I11. So that will make the code static. That will make your range very static. If tomorrow the range expands, it will never go to that line. So instead of that, once you are on the active cell G2, which is the top of this the table, control shift right arrow, and now control shift down arrow. That's it guys. And now let's stop the recording. Now let me take you back to the Visual Basic. Now you see what's going to happen. So this is your basically a macro, and you can see that the macro also added the comments for me. This is question number 4. This is what I have written, right? So if you look at this now, there is one more addition to the line, which is Excel down and Excel to right also, right? So Excel to right obviously is to move to the Excel to the right side. So this is your control plus shift plus right arrow key, right? And this is your Excel down, so this is your control shift and down arrow key. So quite easy actually. I don't think so they are really tough, isn't it guys? I mean, you can make a sense by looking at this. Excel to right is to go to the right, Excel down is to go to the down. If you use the control shift up arrow, you will see Excel up. If you use the left side, if let's say you are here and you select this, you go in the left side, control shift left arrow, then the VBA will generate Excel to left. As simple as that, right? So now I go and show you this. So let's run this code. So let's use the F8 and I press F8, right? Remember, I told you, I'm again repeating, when I press F8 I always make sure that my cursor should be blinking within that macro, right? For example, you know that right now my cursor is blinking just on the right subline, okay? Right on the subline or right on the end subline or within it, everything will work for you, but this will not work for you. If I click outside this and I press F8, do you see that it's not working? I'm trying to press F8. So please make sure your cursor should be blinking between sub and end sub, right? And by the way, if your cursor is blinking here, don't expect that the selecting underscore table is gonna run, because the moment you press F8, this macro will fire, this macro will trigger, right? So let's go and reset this and let's come back here, and now let us go and run this. So there we go, F8. Now you go in the G2. This is very important, I told you, because this selection means that where exactly you are, right? So you cannot avoid this G2. So I'm on the G2 now. From the G2, which becomes my selection, I say control shift right arrow, and now that becomes my selection. If I minimize this window, this becomes my selection. Now from this selection, I'm going to use the selection dot end Excel down. Okay, so I go and run this line and look at this. This is working, right? Very simple. So you just go and create the button, insert, and I go and create the button. So this is my button, and I'll not give this time any name. You can give it when you work on these files if you want to. And here now selecting the table. So I go and click here, and that's how my table is selected, right? So this is how it is, right? So selecting the table, this is the question number 4, or maybe you can write question number 4 here as well, right? Now if I click here, you see that you get the error, cannot run the macro introduction questions.xlsx, which is my file name, sign of exclamation, selecting underscore table. The macro may not be available in this workbook. How is it possible? How it can say that this macro is not possible? Obviously, because I have just changed the name of the macro. So what you have learned now? What you have just learned, guys? If you assign the macro and later on somebody go and change that macro name, or you yourself change the macro name and you try to run that macro again, it's not gonna work, because the macro is not now selecting underscore table. It is now selecting underscore table underscore Q4. So what is the solution? Obviously you have to right click and you have to go to the assign macro and you have to now select that macro again. Make sure you do that, right? So this is the error. Sometimes people also, they don't understand the meaning of this. If the VBA is not able to find the macro for you, that means the macro doesn't exist. Now let's go and click here. Wow, this is working. Cool, pretty cool, right? So we are done with this. Now what is the next question? So the next question is, so why we are not getting the question number 5? I think this is the question number 5 actually. Okay, so now print the value of the last row of table in cell G10. So this is your G10 and we want to print the value of the last row of a table, of this table actually. So what actually we are saying is that if this table right now is ending at the row number 8, so what I want is that I want actually here that the last row of my table, which means 8. So I want to capture here 8, that is what exactly we need. Okay, and if I expand the table, if I write something like this, then obviously the last row is now 9, so this should change to 9. Now this is something new today you're going to learn, right? Now, and this is something which macro will not be able to generate for you. Okay, now how we can capture the last row? It is very easy. The first thing which you will do is, you will, so tell me one thing. If I just ask you that right now you are on the L1 cell, guys, and I say that you have to go to the last cell, which shortcut key will you use? Without mouse, you will use the control down arrow, isn't it? Because control down arrow is the key which takes us to the last cell. Some people get confused with the control shift down arrow key and control down arrow key, right? Though I believe that you're learning the VBA, you must be knowing all these basic things, but still, let me tell you, basically when you use control shift, it is used for the selection. If I say control shift down arrow key, my entire table will be selected, but I don't want to select the table. I actually want to go to the last row. So what you will do, you will use the control down arrow, right? Now you would ask me why I'm doing that, because control down arrow will take you to the last cell of this table, the non-blank cell, right? So that means here when I stop, I want to capture the row number of this cell. So how we can do that? So first of all, let's go and create a macro. So I have to go and press enter, and I can create another macro as well, the module as well. I can go and insert the module, but let's go and write everything in this module. So I go and say that the last row print, okay, and then I say that question number 5. So I'm using the underscores, right, to make it readable for you. So what is the idea now? Let me just remove this for just to have enough space, the project explorer. So we'll go here. Now guys, the first thing which you will do, you will go on the top, which is my L1, okay, dot select. This is how we write. Now from here you will use the control down arrow key. You can record the macro as well, right? If you want to record the macro, you can do that. Okay, so maybe if you want to do that, let's do it quickly. Record the macro. I'll just give it a name called jump because we will delete it then. So now I am on the L1 and I say control down arrow. That's it. I stop the recording. Now let's see that what is the line which is generated. You can see that basically this is the line. Let me cut this line. Now I'm going to use this line in my own program, which is this program which I was writing here, this one. Okay, so I'll just explain you. First of all, let's go and delete this. So I select that entire code and I don't need it. Okay, so this is the code, selection dot end excel down. Okay, this looks like the control shift down arrow key, but it is not, because you see that there is no actually selection word here, range and then bracket start and then selection comma, so that's not there. So this is quite simple actually. This, just see that you got to actually go in the the last row excel down. So when I use this F8, the cell goes in the L1, you can see, and from there control down arrow. That's it guys. Now what is the next thing we want to do? Now we want to actually say that the value in the G10 should be equals to what? So I will say range, and then I will say that G10. Now you will not use the select word here because we do not want to select the G10. That's not the objective. Okay, the objective is to print the value in the G10. So you can use the value. You can say that in the G10 cell, the value which should come, that should be active cell dot row number. Dot row is a new thing I'm telling you, and this is something your macro editor will not be able to generate. So what happens, whenever you want to find the row number of any active cell, you can use this. So now what happens if I run this code, suppose my cursor is here. Okay, so we are making sure when we run this VBA code, it first goes on the L1. From the L1 it uses control down arrow key, and then this becomes the active cell. You can see that in the Excel L8. So what is the active cell row? You know that it is 8. Now this 8 needs to go where? This 8 is equals to my range G10 dot value. So this is what you will do. So you have your answer. Okay, if I go and say that I put some more words here. Okay, now let's say if I run this program now, see what is going to happen. So first it takes me to the L1. From the L1 now I'm again going to use the control down arrow key, and you know that the control down arrow key is going to take you to the last non-blank cell, which is which is L10. So what is the row number of that active cell? Because L10 becomes the active cell for now Excel for VBA, right? So this 10 is there, right? So the things which you need to evaluate, that we always keep on the left side of the equals to, right? And this is a very general math, right? If I have to find x, I always say x equals to. If I have to find y, I always say y equals to, right? So I am saying that reach G10 value. So the value in the G10 should be equals to my active cell dot row, which is 10. So that's how you're getting, you're gonna get the 10 over here. Quite simple. Okay, so that's how you can write this code. So this active cell dot row is something which macro editor will not be able to generate for you. Keep this thing in your mind, right? So we are done with that, I guess. And now what we can do, we can quickly go to the insert and we can say that shapes, and I just go and create the button over here, and I just go and right click and I say assign macro, and this time the macro should come from the, I think, the Q4 sheet, right? No, sorry, this one, the last row. Okay, I press OK and we are done with this. So I click here and you see that it's working. If I just delete that and I click here, you see it is working, right? And if I just go and delete this and I rerun the macro, you see the number is changed, right? So guys, this is what I wanted to discuss. Now in the next video, again, that is going to be on the introduction video, and in that we will make a project. In that project we will use all these shortcut commands like control shift right arrow, down arrow, and up arrow, and ranges command. So that's gonna be a great fun. So you please now watch the part number 3 of the introduction to VBA. I'll see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching.